Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I am super excited to finally be trying Starrily for the first time. I know that must be so crazy to hear because I've been doing my nails for a long time. Starrily has been around for a long time, but I just never got to try them out before, so I am very excited that they sent me so many polishes, so many different formulas and finishes to try. They sent me the Haunted Garden collection, which are the 5 polishes on top, and then this whole row here are just like miscellaneous, I'm assuming bestsellers. And they also sent me their Noble Neons collection, but I am going to be saving those for a separate video just because, as you probably already saw, this video is a pretty long one because I have comparisons for almost every polish, and I figured it would be kind of fun to save the neon video for the middle of like winter, so it's something fun and colorful to look forward to in the middle of the cold winter months. So yeah, go grab a snack, get cozy while we get into this super long swatch and review with comparisons. As always, I'll save more of my thoughts at the end. For now, let's get into the swatches. So starting with the Haunted Garden collection, the first shade we have is Corpse Flower, and this is described as a purple jelly with intense copper color shifting shimmer. So I would say this is on the red leaning side of purple, and it had a really nice formula. It was very even coverage, as you can see here on the first coat, but it was very, very squishy, so it almost is like a jelly kind of formula. It could have just been my application, but I ended up not getting full even coverage on 2 coats, so I did need a 3rd coat for this shade. But again, I think if you are more careful with your application, this could be a solid 2-coater, especially if you do have shorter nails than I do. But I still ended up really loving this one. I mean, you probably know that I'm a big fan of these like deep red leaning purples, especially if they have a copper shimmer. It is just so alluring, so mysterious, just so perfect for the fall. The next polish we have is Moonflower, and this one is actually a silver magnetic nail polish with a bright reddish pink shimmer. So at first I didn't realize that this was a magnetic polish, so I had to redo my swatch. But I'm going to be showing it with the cat eye effect here, and then with the velvet effect, and also with no effect afterwards. So here on the first coat, you can see it is very sheer, so honestly I think this could work as a topper, especially over darker colors. You do immediately see the silver magnetic shimmer going across my nail in the stripe, but you also see that pink to red shifting shimmer. It's kind of like a duochrome, and I really like that about this. At first I just thought it was a very silver type of metallic kind of polish with like a little hint of pink, but having this be a magnetic really makes it stand out so much more. So this one was still a bit sheer for me on the second coat, so I did need a 3rd for this, especially with the cat eye effect. And honestly, you could still see some nail lines, so it's not going to be 100% opaque, but I don't think it looks too bad. And now here I'm going to be doing the velvet effect, where I like to hold the magnet on one side of my nail as I'm painting the coat, and then as soon as I put the brush back in the bottle, I will move the magnet a little bit away from my nail and then go to the other side, just to kind of move the magnetic shimmer around. And at first I wasn't sure how I felt about this, but seeing it next to just no effect, I actually do really like it, because you do get that velvet effect, but you also still see that pink and red shimmer, which I again really like. Next up we have Wolfsbane, and this is described as an indigo purple jelly with a bright copper shimmer. And no, your eyes are not tricking you. This is a different polish than the very first one. It's basically the more blue toned version, and the first one was a red tone version. I will be showing a comparison obviously after this swatch. But yeah, formula wise, this one was a little bit similar to Corpse Flower, where it was a bit of that jelly kind of base. You can see it's not as even coverage as that first shade, especially here on the first coat. It was a little bit patchy, but on 2 coats it pretty much evened out for me right away. I did have a slightly bald spot near the corner, but I was able to dip back in and it self-leveled really nicely. So this one ended up being a solid 2-coater for me. I guess you could do a third coat to deepen the color even more, but I really loved how it looked here on 2 coats. And here it is next to Corpse Flower, so you can see they have the same finish with that copper shimmer. They're just different base colors. So you'll have to let me know which one you like more between these two, because I think Corpse Flower is my favorite. Up next we have Black Widow, and this is a black to red color shifting multi-chrome filled with bright gold shimmer. So you know I'm not the biggest fan of multi-chromes, but I definitely am becoming such a sucker for these black to red ones. I know we've seen a couple on the market already, but I haven't seen one with a gold shimmer like this one, and it really stands out. So I really thought that was so cool just to set it apart from the others on the market. The formula for this one was super lovely. It was very even coverage on the first coat. Not quite 100% opaque, but definitely a solid 2-coater, especially because it is like a black based polish. But I generally found this to be on the more opaque side compared to other multi-chromes that are usually a little bit sheer, at least for me. So you can already start to see the hints of red, but once I adjust the lighting even more, the red really pops and it is so bright. I love it so much, and I again really love the gold little flecks just peeking through. And rounding out the Haunted Garden collection, we have Pumpkin Patch, and this is a black jelly base with copper color shifting metallic flakes. And you probably already know I absolutely love this one. I am just such a fan of anything eerie, spooky, like immediately reminding me of dancing around a campfire in the woods, casting spells, you know, just such a fan. Formula wise, like I mentioned, this is a jelly polish, so on the first coat it is definitely pretty sheer, but pretty even coverage for the most part. It does build up nicely on 2 coats, not to the point that it's 100% opaque. You do still see some nail lines, some squishiness, but I just don't think it's necessary to do a 3rd coat for this one. I love how it looks as is, and those metallic flakies just pop. They are so gorgeous. I would say this is my favorite from the collection. And then moving on to the, I'm assuming, bestsellers or just miscellaneous polishes that Starrily sent to me. The first one we have is Venom, and this is their take on the black to red color shifting multi-chrome. And there's not much to say, I guess. It is just a beautiful shade. This one did have a nice formula where I didn't find it to be super sheer on the first coat. It was fairly pigmented, so I think for me it's a solid 2-coater, and I think you would only need a 3rd coat if your nails were longer than mine, or I guess if you happen to do thinner coats than I do. But yeah, this one looks so gorgeous. I love that there is this kind of like bluish gray kind of shimmer head on, but obviously the real standout is when you have it in adjusted lighting or indirect lighting to see that bright red shimmer. It is just so vibrant, so gorgeous. So this is basically the same exact base as the polished Black Widow from the Haunted Garden collection. Again, the main difference with Black Widow was that it included this golden shimmer. So again, you'll have to let me know which one is your favorite between these two. Next up we have Vantablack, and this is Starrily's 1-coat black cream polish. So I already knew this was going to be a 1-coater and just absolutely delicious to apply. It was so buttery smooth, very pigmented, very even coverage, just 10 out of 10 formula wise. It is so smooth, so perfect. It's a 1-coat black. What more can you expect? The next cream I have is Forest of the Night, and this one is described as a highly pigmented, bright and creamy dark green nail polish. So I think I would call this like a hunter, or I guess a forest green. And even though it does kind of look bright here on camera, there is a level of mutedness or dustiness that this shade has that I think is just so pretty. It really sets it apart from other dark greens that are usually like very emerald or like the pine greens. It's hard to explain it, but you just have to trust me. This is a beautiful shade of green. It also had a beautiful formula where it was almost fully opaque on the first coat. It definitely is highly pigmented, but I just needed to even everything out. The next polish I have is Pluto, and this is a mesmerizing magnetic nail polish with an emerald green base, gold to green color shifting magnetic shimmer, and a micro holographic sparkle. So I was so excited that they sent this one over because I have heard amazing things about Starrely's magnetics, and I was just so excited to finally try one out myself. I loved the color of this one, especially the base. I know they describe it as an emerald green, but I would almost consider it like a teal because there is such a heavy blue undertone to it, and I really love that about this shade. It was a little bit sheer on the first coat, but not nearly as jelly or squishy as other brands, so this built up really nicely on 2 coats. You still could see through to my nail line a tiny bit, but I just don't think it's necessary to do a 3rd coat. And you know I had to try this with a velvet effect because that is just my favorite way to wear magnetics. Even though I did say this wasn't as jelly or squishy as other brands, it does still have a squishy kind of base color to it, so I did find that this one magnetized really well, especially for a velvet effect. I think it just looks so gorgeous. The shimmer really stands out and is such a beautiful contrast against the base color, which definitely looks a lot deeper and more of a true emerald green here. It also just has more dimension in general compared to applying it straight out of the bottle with no magnetic effect at all. Next up I have AU, and this is a brilliant golden micro flaky foil nail polish. I have heard such amazing things about this polish, and I was just so blown away when I swiped it across my nail. It is just such an absolutely beautiful, perfect, foily, metallic type of gold. Just so dazzling, so mesmerizing, and I found this one was opaque for me on 1 coat alone. The next polish I have is Sphynx, and this one is described as a red/purple jelly chrome with holographic flakes. So I was super intrigued by this description, one, because I've just never heard of a jelly chrome before. I guess maybe it's one of Starrely's like signature finishes or something, but I was also just thrown off by it because I wouldn't consider this a jelly at all. As you can see on the first coat, it is incredibly pigmented, very full coverage on the first coat alone. There were some areas that were a little bit squishy, but I guess I would just kind of consider it like a crelly maybe, and it covered up fully in 2 coats. So description aside, this polish is absolutely beautiful. I loved it. Next up I have the Cat's Meow, and this is a periwinkle base with bright copper shimmer and holographic flecks. So no surprise, this is an immediate favorite of mine. I just love these types of shimmery formulas that have this like dainty hollow sparkle, and this one was absolutely stunning. It had such an amazing formula too that was very full coverage on the first coat. I was honestly kind of impressed with the opacity on this one. I'm just so used to these shimmers being like very sheer and needing 3 coats, but I found that this one looked amazing in 2 coats. I just love that periwinkle base and the copper shimmer. It is just such a beautiful contrast. And I also obviously love the holographic sparkle in this one. And last but certainly not least, we have Aphrodite, and this is a pink shimmer nail polish with subtle color shifts to green and blue. I would also say that head on it has this like golden, almost coppery kind of shimmer, so it really is like a shifty sort of shade. And no surprise, this is another favorite of mine. I am just such a sucker for these like pink shifting shimmers, and I kind of was surprised that I loved it so much because at first I wasn't sure about this base color. It is pink, but it definitely leans like a little bit like an orchid pink maybe, and those usually aren't my favorites, but the combination of this base with the shimmer I just thought was so beautiful, so ethereal. So here in some pretty extreme lighting, you can see the shift to that green and aqua, and it is just so gorgeous. I also really love the formula on this one. This was basically a solid 2-coater for me. So here is the collection lineup for the Haunted Garden collection, which I know I'm definitely a little late to sharing this. It's more appropriate for like Halloween or fall with all of these moody, dark colors, but I still really love the lineup. And then for the miscellaneous slash bestsellers, I just absolutely adore them all. They have amazing, amazing formulas. Color preference wise, obviously the bottom row is gonna be my favorite, but I still really enjoyed the top row so much. I can't wait to hear what your favorites are. And finally, getting into comparisons, we're starting with Corpse Flower and looking at it next to Mooncat's Sin Eater from the Band of Misfits collection a couple of months ago. These both have a very similar burgundy, purple-ish leaning base color with the same kind of copper shimmer in there. But as you can see, there's a lot more shimmer in Mooncat's polish and it's a lot more dispersed in Corpse Flower. And Corpse Flower also is a little bit more of a true purple. So similar vibes, but not dupes. Then for Moonflower, I wanted to quickly show it next to Mooncat's Heavenmetal, which was also from that Band of Misfits collection, because it kind of had a similar vibe with this like icy, whitish base color with this like different color shimmer, but Heavenmetal has a blue shimmer, and obviously Moonflower is also magnetic, so not dupes, but maybe cousins. Next for Wolfsbane, I knew I had to see this next to ILNP's Hallucinate because I was just immediately reminded of it when it comes to this reddish copper shimmer in this indigo purple base. But kind of like Sin Eater and Corpse Flower, these are very, very similar, but there is a lot less of that shimmer in the Starrily polishes, so you see a lot more of the base color. I think I would say that Wolfsbane is more of a true indigo, and it's also a lot darker and more opaque. Next for Venom, I know the obvious comparison is supposed to be ILNP's Eclipse, but believe it or not, I don't have that polish, so I have to show it next to ILNP's Orbit from the Cosmos collection a couple of months ago. This is basically a very, very similar version of Eclipse or a black to red multichrome. I would say that this is more on the gray side, and it kind of has like more of a blue shimmer head on, but it still does shift to red in extreme angles, but I'll say it's not as vibrant or intense as it is on Venom's side, so similar but not dupes. Then for Pumpkin Patch, I of course had to show this next to ILNP's Hex, which is their black jelly with these orange, golden, iridescent flakies. So these are definitely very, very similar. The flakies are pretty much the same kind of color, but in Starry's polish, the flakies are more of a metallic type of flaky, so it's a little bit more like reflective and shiny. And in ILNP, it's more of an iridescent flaky, so they're a little bit more sheer and kind of glowy. ILNP also has a very dainty sparkle, and I would say it's a little bit more opaque too. Next for Forest of the Night, I wanted to quickly show this next to Cirque's McKittrick, which is a super dark green polish. This is like kind of a true neutral green that is very dark, so hopefully you can see just how muted Forest of the Night is. And I know it's not similar color-wise to Holo Taco's Modest Moss, but it is similar in terms of their mutedness or dustiness, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like the darker version. Then for Pluto, I actually wanted to see this next to ILNP's Enchantment from the Fairy Forest collection. This is one of my favorite ILNP shades, one of my favorite magnetics. It is just such a beautiful polish, and Pluto kind of reminded me of it on the first coat at least because it was a little bit like teal leaning. But here on two coats, you can see that Pluto is definitely a lot more green while Enchantment is more of a teal. So for some closer green comparisons, I have it next to ILNP's Venom from last year's Trapped collection. This one is in a super dark base that's basically almost black, but it still has a bright green to gold kind of magnetic shimmer. And then a closer comparison that I have is Cirque's Mood Ring, which kind of has that really similar teal, blue, green base color with this really bright gold to green magnetic shimmer. At first, from the bottle shot alone, I thought that Mood Ring was going to be a little bit different, like almost too bright to compare to Pluto, but on the nail it ended up looking really, really similar, where I would say it's almost like the same kind of base and a lot closer than Venom. You can see that one was just way too dark, and the only thing missing from Mood Ring is just the extra kind of little hollow sparkle, and it's also a little bit more sheer. Then for AU, I knew I had to see this next to Cirque's 24K Affair, which is my favorite foily gold metallic kind of shade. So these definitely have very similar finishes. They just are slightly different color-wise, where AU is a bit deeper and a little bit warmer. Like it's more of a pale gold on Cirque's polish, and AU also has a stronger gold shimmer, so there's a bit more contrast and depth. Next for Sphynx, I was actually immediately reminded of Mooncat's Pomegranate Seeds from the Underworld collection a couple of months ago. It doesn't have quite the same red to purple multi-chrome base, but it still has a reddish purpley base color with a blue shimmer. So they sort of have these same kind of elements. The base color on Mooncat's side is just a lot more sheer though, and more of like a true jelly kind of color. And it also has larger orange iridescent flakies. So again, I would kind of call these polishes cousins, but not dupes. Then for the cat's Meow, I was immediately reminded of a couple of Cirque shimmers, the first one being Crying Contest, which is this really beautiful periwinkle base color. This one has more of a gold shimmer head on, but it does shift to that copper in more indirect light. So I thought a closer color comparison was Cirque's Velvetine, which, as you know, is one of my favorite shades. This one does have that same copper shimmer, but the base color is a little bit different, where it's not periwinkle, it's more of like a darker dusty blue. So those two are a lot more similar than Crying Contest. That one is just a little too light, again with the gold shimmer. I guess maybe the base color of the cat's Meow is more similar to Crying Contest, but just several shades darker, and then it has the matching shimmer of Velvetine, so it's the perfect in between. And lastly for Aphrodite, the closest polish that I had to it was Mooncat's High Fructose, which is this really light, almost icy orchid pink base with this beautiful shimmer that shifts from this yellowy gold to green and aqua in extreme angles. So the shimmer is a little bit similar. It is more yellow head on in Mooncat than in Aphrodite, but it almost has that like opalescent shift to it, which I really love. But yeah, these are definitely not dupes. Aphrodite is a lot darker and more opaque. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for Starrily. I would love to know what your thoughts are on Starrily, especially if you have tried them before. Let me know if you've seen some of your favorites in today's video. If you haven't tried them before, let me know what you think of these polishes. Did you like the Haunted Garden collection, or were you more of a fan of their other polishes? Because I guess talking about the Haunted Garden collection first, I really loved it as a lineup. It just felt so appropriate for spooky season, which I know we are like well past, but I'm just still such a fan of like the dark, moody, alluring kind of vibes with that set. And obviously for the other polishes, they are all amazing. Like I really don't have any complaints. They have just such amazing formulas, really great coverage, really great pigmentation. I guess the only thing is I'm not super crazy about their brush. I don't hate it. Like it's not as bad as a skinny brush, for example. Maybe I would say this is more similar to like an OPI brush where it's like that flat rectangle. And I think I'm definitely more of a fan of like a paddle shaped brush where it's a little bit rounded. As you saw for some of my swatches, I was kind of having a little bit of trouble with my application. I normally am a messy swatcher anyway, but usually with a paddle brush, I will be less messy. I do wonder if they would ever switch over to a different brush, but these aren't bad. I think some of my favorites that I've tried are actually the shimmers, because I was just so surprised at how pigmented they were, where they're just solid two coaters but still have so much shimmer and depth to them. And I'm so happy to report that I love the magnetics that I tried. I know the whole like planets collection is just such an iconic one. So yeah, overall just like 10s across the board. I am a big fan. Again, make sure to let me know what your favorite Starrily polishes are, whether they were in this video or not, or just let me know any and all thoughts that you have down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today in this super long video. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!